Hey there movie lovers, welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're diving into the harrowing and unforgettable world of Midnight Express. Released in 1978 and directed by Alan Parker with a screenplay by Oliver Stone, this powerful drama tells the story of Billy Hayes, a young American arrested in Turkey for smuggling and subjected to a brutal prison system that would push him to his limits. So brace yourselves and get ready for a wild ride through one man's desperate fight for freedom as we reveal 20 things you never knew about Midnight Express. At the time, Oliver Stone was a relatively new and largely untested screenwriter, so when he was commissioned to write the screenplay, his first draft was expected to serve merely as a starting point. Director Alan Parker even anticipated taking over the writing duties once Stone had completed his initial version. However, the screenplay Stone delivered exceeded all expectations, leaving all impressed and in agreement that it was an outstanding initial draft. Columbia Pictures initially pushed for Richard Gere to take the lead, but director Alan Parker strongly disagreed, especially as Gere refused to audition. Parker instead screen-tested other actors, with Sam Bottoms, Dennis Quaid and Brad Davis delivering standout auditions. Their performances ultimately convinced the studio that Gere wasn't the right fit. Meanwhile, Maureen McCormick, best known as Marcia in The Brady Bunch, auditioned for the role of Susan in an effort to break away from her wholesome image. Although she was called back several times and even agreed to the film's nudity requirements, Parker ultimately felt her strong association with the sitcom would be too distracting and chose not to cast her. Several elements of Hayes' story were altered or embellished for the film. In the movie, Billy Hayes is in Turkey with his girlfriend when he is arrested, whereas in reality he was travelling alone. Although the book recounts that he spent 17 days in the prison's psychiatric hospital in 1972, he never bites out anyone's tongue, a moment in the film that results in him being committed to a ward for the criminally insane. The book concludes with Hayes being transferred to another prison on an island, from which he eventually escapes by stealing a dinghy and rowing 17 miles through a raging storm across the Sea of Marmara. He then makes his way on foot and by bus to Istanbul, before crossing the border into Greece. In the film, this sequence is replaced by a violent confrontation, in which he unintentionally kills the head guard, who is attempting to assault him. In reality, the guard, Hamidou, was killed in 1973 by a recently paroled prisoner, who encountered him at a cafe outside the prison and shot him 8 times. The attempted assault depicted in the film was also fictionalized. Hayes does not claim in the book to have suffered any sexual violence at the hands of his Turkish warders, and instead describes engaging in consensual relations while imprisoned. The film, by contrast, shows him gently rejecting the advances of a fellow inmate. The film's harsh criticism of Turkey escalated into a diplomatic issue. The US Embassy in Ankara was left to manage the fallout, as the portrayal of Turks as brutal villains strained relations between the United States and Turkey for years. Behind the international incident lay a deeply personal tragedy. Hayes' father, a man from Long Island, spent his entire life savings and even mortgaged his home in a desperate attempt to secure his son's release. Ignoring repeated warnings from the embassy, he fell victim to one scam artist after another, driven by the hope of bringing Billy home. When Hayes finally returned to the United States, he was overwhelmed with shame and distress at what his actions had cost his family, having effectively bankrupted them. It was then that freelance writer William Hoffer approached him with an opportunity to recover some of the lost money. Together, the two collaborated on a book, which became known as Midnight Express. Kept secret for many years on the advice of his lawyers, Billy Hayes had actually travelled to Turkey on 3 prior occasions and successfully smuggled hashish back to the United States. Both the book and the film focus on his 4th attempt, when he was finally caught, turning what had previously been a repeated risk into a life-altering ordeal. Prior to principal photography, director Sir Alan Parker wrote a letter to the cast and crew, which was later used in the film's publicity. In it, he explained, firstly, to say something before we start. Secondly, to warn you about a very difficult film. And thirdly, because I heard Ingmar Bergman always did it, as you have gathered from the script, it is my intention to make a very violent, uncompromisingly brutal film, the subject matter of which will no doubt take its toll on us all. This is not just a boring prison story set in claustrophobic cells and corridors. It is much, much more than that. A prison no one's ever seen before. It's difficult to put into words, but I would like the audience to be shaken and shocked that such things happen, almost to the point of disbelief, but never to lose them. In an effort to fully inhabit his role, John Hurt reportedly stopped bathing for much of the film's 53-day shooting schedule. His commitment to authenticity was so extreme that his appearance, and particularly the smell, became difficult for others on set to endure, with some of his colleagues keeping their distance during filming. Midnight Express faced widespread criticism for its negative portrayal of Turkish people. Following its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, the Turkish government sought to ban the film through embassies worldwide, condemning it as anti-Turk rhetoric. Protests spread across Europe, with Turkish communities in the UK, France, Ireland, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland and West Germany demonstrating against screenings. The Turkish press denounced the film as both insulting and a political attack, and in France the backlash was strong enough to force 3 cinemas to stop showing it. The controversy even reached Australia, where a cinema was evacuated after a bomb threat linked to tensions surrounding the film's release. Although the story is set largely in Turkey, the movie was filmed almost entirely at Fort St. Elmo in Valletta, Malta, after permission to film in Istanbul was denied. The historic 16th century fortress, originally built by the Knights of St. John, provided a convincing stand-in for a Turkish prison. In the airport scene, the Turkish customs officer appears to speak Turkish to Billy Hayes, but is actually speaking Maltese after forgetting his lines and improvising in his native language. He is not the only one. Another airport guard and even a fellow prisoner also slip into Maltese during their scenes, adding an unexpected layer of authenticity, just not the one intended. Despite his powerful performance, Brad Davis failed to receive an Academy Award nomination for Midnight Express. Reports at the time suggested the snub may have been influenced by his off-screen behaviour, including a notorious Hollywood party incident where he allegedly tore off his shirt and shouted, "Okay, who's got the drugs?" prompting a director to remark, "There goes that career." According to his wife, Davis's rapid rise was undermined by heavy drinking, drug use and erratic conduct. She recalled a disturbing episode in which Davis fired a gun to shatter framed photos of himself and later defaced hotel room walls, further fueling his reputation for self-destructive behaviour. Irene Miracle recalled that filming her topless prison scene was particularly challenging, as it required more than 20 takes. To make the process more manageable, a privacy box was constructed so that only Brad Davis and the director of photography could see the action, which she said made a significant difference. While she had no objection to appearing nude on screen, she admitted the scene was still difficult to perform. The scene during Billy Hayes' visit with Susan, where she removes her top, pressing herself against the window, was cut from the 1980 home video release and television broadcasts. There was originally a planned scene in which she is arrested for the act, but it was ultimately removed. On the night of the Golden Globe Awards, Irene Miracle had a chaotic start, tripping and briefly being trampled in the rush into the ballroom, then ending up stuck outside after security failed to recognise her. By the time she was finally let in, she was badly shaken. When she later won her award, presenter Lucille Ball immediately sensed something was wrong and warmly embraced her, reassuring her with kind words. Miracle later said that Ball's compassion in that moment stayed with her for years, giving her strength whenever she needed it. Midnight Express was nominated for 6 Oscars, including Best Director and Best Film. It won Academy Awards for Giorgio Moroder's Best Original Score and Oliver Stone's Best Screenplay, marking the first time a fully synthesized score had taken the top honor in that category. Stone and Moroder would later collaborate again on Scarface in 1983. The film was a major commercial success, grossing over $35 million against a modest $2 million budget. Its strong box office performance, driven by word of mouth and critical attention, turned it into one of the most profitable films of its time and solidified its reputation as a hard-hitting must-see drama. Upon its release, the film received generally positive reviews from critics, with particular praise directed at Brad Davis's performance, as well as the supporting cast, writing, direction, and the score. However, Billy Hayes and others were critical of the film's portrayal of Turkish prison officials as violent and villainous, and for straying too far from the original source material. Screenwriter Oliver Stone issued an apology in 2004 for the offence caused to Turkey by the film. Visiting the country for the first time since its 1978 release, he acknowledged that he had over-dramatised the screenplay. Billy Hayes returned to Turkey in 2007 and, during a widely publicised press conference, described the film as a significant exaggeration and a one-sided portrayal of his experiences. He expressed regret and accepted responsibility for the lasting damage the film had done to Turkey's image around the world. Reportedly, even a quarter of a century after its release, some people still cited the film as a reason not to visit the country. Billy Hayes returned to the stage off-Broadway at the Barrow Street Theatre with the gripping solo play Riding the Midnight Express with Billy Hayes. The production traces his extraordinary real-life ordeal in a Turkish prison, his harrowing escape, and the journey that led to his story being adapted into the Oscar-winning film. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about Midnight Express. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.